On a humid Tuesday afternoon, Ethan Walker stepped through the faded glass doors of a Nuggo King restaurant on East Houston's industrial edge. Wearing khaki jeans, a loose navy hoodie, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow, he didn't look like the founder of a billion-dollar fast food empire. The inside greeted him with a wave of artificial chicken scent mixed with something far less appetizing: stale grease clinging to surfaces that hadn't been cleaned properly. The once vibrant red and gold decor was dulled by years of neglect. His eyes swept over sticky floor tiles, overflowing trash bins near the entrance, and a counter smeared with fingerprints and oil. A young cashier, no older than 19, didn't bother to lift her eyes from her phone as she took his order. There was no greeting, no warmth, and certainly no sign of the cheerful service Nuggo King prided itself on. Ethan kept his tone casual, asking for a six-piece nugget meal with fries, then handed over a $10 bill. The cashier slid change back without counting or acknowledging him. It was a far cry from the customer. First standards etched into every Nuggo King training manual. He took his tray, selected a corner booth, and sat with a clear view of the kitchen entrance. Though it was lunchtime, only a handful of customers were scattered around, mostly blue-collar workers and families with young children. For a flagship location in one of Texas's busiest cities, the emptiness was troubling. As he opened the box of nuggets, a nostalgic scent should have greeted him, a savory blend of 11 herbs and spices that had once filled his mother's kitchen. Instead, the smell was off. It was flatter muted, and when he picked up a nugget, it felt lighter than it should. He took one cautious bite. The texture was spongy and overly uniform, with a synthetic aftertaste that no Nuggo King product should have. His instincts went on high alert. After decades of refining his recipe, Ethan knew immediately this wasn't the authentic product. Setting the half-eaten piece aside, he lifted the paper tray to inspect the box more closely, and that's when he saw it. Wedged underneath the lining paper was a small, glossy label: Summit Poultry Co. It was a name he'd never seen before. Ethan's stomach tightened. Only 2 poultry suppliers were certified to provide product for Nuggo King restaurants nationwide: Summit. Poultry was not one of them, and any deviation from official suppliers wasn't just a breach, it was a direct violation of franchise agreements without making a scene. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and sent a quick text to Claire Morgan, his VP of Operations, and the only person aware of his undercover visit. Just found a Summit Poultry label under the nuggets. This isn't our product. Within seconds, her response came through. What Summit's not in our system? Digging now. As Ethan scanned the kitchen staff from his booth, he noticed a young man at the drive-through window glancing nervously toward the back office. A woman in her 40s wearing a red Nuggo King polo shirt sat behind a desk and typed rapidly on a keyboard. According to the file Ethan reviewed that morning, this must be Tracy Bell, the franchise manager. She had worked with Nuggo King for nearly a decade, but her recent reviews were shaky: declining sales, increasing customer complaints, and now potentially product tampering. Ethan discreetly took photos of the nugget box, the label, and the food itself. His hands were steady, but inside he was fuming. If someone was cutting corners using off-brand chicken to save money, they were jeopardizing not just the customer experience, but the safety and trust built into every Nuggo King meal. As his phone buzzed again with a message from Claire Summit. Poultry is registered under a shell company in Harris County. No ties to us. Looks shady. Ethan knew what he had to do next. It was time to escalate, but not as CEO. Not yet. First, he needed to know just how deep the rot went before making his move. He stood, dumped his tray, and exited the restaurant without fanfare, but not before catching one last glance at Tracy Bell, who was now pacing behind the counter and checking her phone with visible tension. He didn't need to confront her just yet. That would come later. For now, Ethan Walker's next step was clear: initiate a covert audit of the franchise and trace every shipment back to its source. Because if someone was trying to cheat the system he built from the ground up, they were about to learn just how fiercely Ethan protected his name and his mother's recipe. Back in his hotel suite just miles from the East Houston Nuggo King, Ethan Walker prepared for the confrontation he knew couldn't wait. The chicken nugget box from earlier that day sat on the coffee table, sealed in a plastic evidence bag beside the Summit Poultry label. Ethan stared at it for a long moment, jaw clenched. Then he opened the audio recorder app on his phone, slid it into his shirt pocket, and dialed the restaurant's number. A dull voice answered on the third ring, Nuggo King, East Side. "How can I help you?" Ethan's tone shifted instantly. No longer casual, no longer undercover. "This is Ethan Walker. I need to speak with Tracy Bell. Now." There was a pause on the other end, muffled background voices, and then he heard the phone being handed over. "Mr. Walker, this is Tracy. What can I do for you?" Her voice was composed, but he could hear it, the slight waver of panic beneath her practiced professionalism. "I'm in your restaurant," Ethan said, glancing out the hotel window at the neon-lit strip where the franchise sat. "Corner booth by the window. I'd like you to join me." In reality, he wasn't there, but the lie served its purpose. He imagined her scanning the dining room, trying to locate a man who wasn't there. "Of course, sir. Right away." She hung up, and Ethan could practically feel her pulse quicken from across town. Within minutes, she called him back. "I didn't see you. Are you still here?" "No, Tracy." "I'm not, but we need to talk. Face to face. I'll be back in 20. He ended the call, grabbed the nugget box and label, and headed out the door. This time, he wasn't pretending to be just another customer. When Ethan walked back into the restaurant, Tracy was waiting near the entrance, her smile tight and eyes searching. She approached quickly. "Mr. Walker." "What a surprise. If I'd known you were coming." Ethan didn't let her finish. He pulled out the box and placed it on a nearby table. "Then maybe you'd have served me real Nuggo King chicken instead of these knockoffs," he said coldly. Her expression froze, then faltered. "I'm not sure what you mean. Let's talk inside." He motioned toward the corner booth. As they sat down, Ethan activated the audio recorder on the table. "Tell me about Summit Poultry," he said evenly. Tracy's face drained of color. "Mr. Walker, there's been a lot of chaos lately. Supply chain issues, delayed deliveries. Everyone's had to improvise." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So your solution was to serve counterfeit chicken to my customers?" He pointed at the Summit Poultry label. "This supplier isn't authorized. That's a clear breach of your franchise agreement and the product. It doesn't even come close to matching our formula." Tracy's voice grew defensive. "We had no choice. The pandemic disrupted everything. Orders weren't being filled. I had to keep the store running." Ethan leaned in. "Then you should have contacted corporate. There's no record of any request from this location." He snapped photos of the nugget box, the label, and Tracy's increasingly distressed expression. "I've already sent samples to our lab, and you're not going to like the results." As Tracy sputtered excuses, blaming suppliers, software errors, and miscommunications, Ethan knew she was scrambling. He cut her off. "If there's anything you want to admit before the tests come back, now's the time." The next morning, Ethan met with Claire Morgan in a private conference room. A sleek tablet lay between them, displaying side-by-side composition reports from Nuggo King's standard nugget recipe and the sample taken from Tracy's store. The differences were undeniable. "The knockoffs contain nearly 40% filler," Claire explained. "Different fat ratios, artificial binders, and cheap preservatives. This isn't even a close match." Ethan exhaled sharply. "We've been feeding this to families." Claire tapped her screen again, pulling up a registry entry. "And here's the kicker. Summit Poultry is owned by a man named Doug Weller." She paused. "That's Tracy Bell's brother-in-law. He also runs Horizon Meats, a plant cited last year for FDA violations." Ethan felt his stomach turn. So this wasn't just improvisation, this was calculated. The more Claire dug, the worse the story became. There were financial records, bulk orders from Summit Poultry to Tracy's restaurant, going back months hidden behind doctored invoices, and troublingly similar patterns appeared in 3 other Nuggo King branches in nearby counties, all showing perfect supply logs in our system, Claire said, but 0 actual deliveries from our official vendors. Looks like they're using a network. Ethan's face hardened. Start tracing ownership on all of them. If they're linked to Tracy or Doug Weller, I want names, accounts, and paper trails. He stood and looked out the window, watching traffic blur past in the afternoon heat. They've been stealing from this company, from our customers, from me. Claire placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll get them. Ethan. His reply was calm, but cold as steel. No, we'll stop them, and we'll make sure they never get another chance. The next morning, just after sunrise, Ethan Walker stood in front of the same Nuggo King restaurant, but this time he wasn't Ethan Walker. Dressed in corporate khakis, a button-down shirt, polished shoes and wire-rimmed glasses, he now went by Mr. Daniels, a quality assurance officer from Nuggo King's headquarters, a laminated ID badge complete with a barcode and holographic seal hung from his neck. Claire had overnighted the credentials and rigged his tablet to interface directly with the restaurant's internal systems without raising red flags. As he adjusted his glasses and stepped inside, the early shift was just beginning. The team moved quickly to prep for breakfast service, but several employees paused and exchanged worried glances when they saw the man with a clipboard walking in with purpose. A young shift supervisor approached him with a cautious smile. "You must be Mr. Daniels from corporate." Ethan nodded, extending his hand. "Annual quality audit. Nothing to worry about, just standard procedures." He was led to the back of the store, where the supply room buzzed with humming freezers and stacks of inventory. The supervisor, who introduced himself as Marcus, gave Ethan a brief rundown of the system. "Everything's digital. Now Miss Bell does most of the ordering, but I can pull up our logs for you." Ethan took a seat at the terminal and began reviewing the store's digital supply chain records. On paper, everything looked perfect. Shipments from Nuggo King's 2 authorized suppliers appeared regularly. Invoices matched expected volumes, and inventory turnover was consistent, but Ethan already knew what to expect. This wasn't the truth. It was a facade. While Alicia's software quietly downloaded the entire year's worth of data in the background, Ethan asked to see physical backups. "Sometimes Tracy keeps paper invoices in her office." Marcus offered. "I can check." Ethan nodded, noting Marcus's discomfort. "And while you're at it, could you ask the kitchen staff to prepare samples of all current protein products, raw and cooked, please, with Marcus gone?" Ethan connected his tablet to the terminal. Alicia's voice crackled through the discreet earpiece. "I'm in. Everything they've entered looks perfect, but they're keeping 2 sets of records. You were right." As Ethan scrolled through the live feed, he found a hidden folder labeled Vendor Provisional, buried beneath layers of system directories. It contained invoices from Summit Poultry, co-dated over the last 7 months, complete with signatures, delivery times, and cost breakdowns. They were ordering lower-grade chicken at a fraction of the price, then selling it as premium. Nuggo King meals, Claire just confirmed. "Our official suppliers haven't delivered here in months," Alicia added. "This is systematic fraud." Ethan's blood boiled, but he stayed composed. He needed first-hand testimony before taking action. The samples arrived soon after, along with a small, nervous voice. "Excuse me, are you with corporate?" A young employee, no older than 18, stood by the door in a faded red apron. Her name tag read, Maya. Ethan offered a reassuring nod. "Yes, Mr. Daniels. I'm just here to make sure everything's up to standard." Maya hesitated, eyes darting to the kitchen. Is this confidential?" "Completely," Ethan said. "What you tell me won't be shared unless you give permission." She stepped inside, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. "There's something wrong with the food here," she whispered. "The chicken comes in plain boxes, no Nuggo King labels, nothing like what we saw in the training videos." Ethan encouraged her to go on taking careful notes. "Tracy says it's just temporary, but we're not allowed to ask questions. She makes us sign these forms, like legal forms, NDAs." I think Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Non-disclosure agreements." Maya nodded. "She made us all sign them last week, said it was for team unity." But one of the other guys, Carlos, he used to be assistant manager. He asked questions. 2 days later, he was transferred. But Dion said he found Carlos's uniform in the dumpster. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just fraud. It was an environment built on fear and manipulation. Have others noticed anything? He asked. Maya bit her lip. People talk, but they're scared. Hours get cut if you speak up. Dion warned me when I started. He's been here a while, said to keep my head down. Ethan thanked her quietly. You did the right thing. Maya, and I promise, help is coming. As she returned to the kitchen, he sent the product samples to Alicia's lab team and continued scanning digital records. Patterns emerged, duplicate invoices, supplier aliases, and payments routed through third-party bank accounts. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just Tracy Bell going rogue, it was organized. He texted Claire, "Get legal ready, we've got a network." Her reply came in seconds. Understood. We're moving to containment phase. Ethan exhaled slowly, staring at the terminal screen that held months of deception behind a facade of routine. It was time to bring the truth to light and those responsible to justice. Back in the cramped, windowless break room of the East Houston Nuggo King, Ethan Walker made his next move. After spending the morning collecting digital records, interviewing wary employees, and analyzing counterfeit product samples, he was now ready to go deeper. Sitting across from David Harris, the restaurant's senior cook, who had been with the company for over 5 years, Ethan studied the man's expression carefully. David had been guarded during their initial conversation, delivering the same overly rehearsed phrases as others. Great team, smooth operations, nothing unusual. But there was something in his eyes that told Ethan the truth was buried just beneath the surface. "Mr. Harris," Ethan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. With one slow motion, he removed the wireframe glasses and placed them on the table. "My name's not Mr. Daniels. I'm Ethan Walker." I founded Nuggo King. David's face froze in disbelief, eyes widening as he sat back in his chair. You're the Ethan Walker." Ethan nodded solemnly. "And I need your help to clean this place up." David sat in stunned silence for a few seconds before leaning forward. "I had no idea," he said slowly. "We tried reporting it, but it never made a difference." Ethan prompted him gently. "Tell me what happened." With the door closed and the hum of a vending machine in the background, David finally opened up. Tracy came in about 8 months ago with big changes. She replaced half the shift supervisors within a month, brought in people she knew. Then she put new controls on everything. No one but her could access the supplier systems. Deliveries were handled privately. And if anyone asked questions, they were either transferred, pushed out, or had their hours cut until they quit. He shook his head. We weren't even allowed near the loading dock on delivery days. And the chicken. You could tell just by looking. It wasn't ours? Ethan listened closely, recording everything. Why didn't anyone escalate it to headquarters? David scoffed. Carlos tried, so did I. But Tracy was somehow intercepting emails and deleting complaints before they got through. We figured she had someone on the inside. After the conversation, Ethan stepped outside into the alley behind the restaurant and dialed Claire. "It's worse than we thought," he said grimly. "They've been running this operation in plain sight, and Tracy built a firewall of loyalty and fear." Claire's voice came through the line, sharp and clear. "We've been digging. You need to sit down for this summit. Poultry has been supplying fake products to 12 Nuggo King locations across Texas, all showing perfect reports in our internal system, but our verified suppliers haven't delivered to any of those branches in over 7 months. Ethan's stomach turned. "They've built a shadow network." "Exactly," Claire continued. "All 12 stores are run by managers who have a direct connection to Tracy or her brother-in-law. Some even served as co-signers on shell company accounts. We also found a messaging thread, an internal Slack-style app they've been using to coordinate product swaps and falsify delivery data. This wasn't mismanagement, it was conspiracy." With the pieces falling into place, Ethan wasted no time. "Call legal, call compliance." "We're doing this now," he said, his tone decisive. Within hours, the company's response engine roared to life. Claire coordinated teams from HQ, while Ethan returned to the command suite of his hotel, which had been temporarily converted into a war room. Black SUVs with tinted windows rolled up to each compromised location across the state, simultaneously unloading corporate security officers, FDA field agents, and independent forensic auditors. Ethan himself returned to the East Houston store, no longer in disguise, but as the full authority of Nuggo King. The dining area fell silent when he entered, the weight of recognition sinking in among staff and customers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said clearly, "your meals today are complimentary, but this location is now temporarily closed for a full corporate review." The reaction was a mix of confusion, fear, and relief. Those who had stayed quiet out of fear now knew the storm had arrived, but it had come for justice. Tracy Bell was escorted into the office by corporate security, while Ethan stood in the doorway, his eyes locked on hers. She had already heard. One glance at the stern expressions around her told the whole story. "You don't understand," she tried, but Ethan raised a hand. "Save it." The evidence was overwhelming. Doctored invoices, NDAs issued to silent staff, secret bank accounts linked to product purchases, and a full-scale inventory. Mismatch between recorded and actual deliveries. Each document added a nail to the coffin of the operation she had masterminded. As she was led out in silence, Ethan turned to the remaining employees. "If you've ever felt you couldn't speak up," he said, "those days are over." Over the next few hours, interviews resumed, this time with corporate HR legal advisors and ethics officers. On site, Ethan's team documented each employee's experience to determine who had been complicit and who had been victims of manipulation. By nightfall, the first phase of the corporate takedown was complete. All 12 affected branches were closed, pending inspection, and court orders had frozen assets tied to Summit Poultry and Horizon Meats. A press release had been drafted for the morning papers, one that would admit the breach, lay out the company's swift actions, and reassert its commitment to quality and transparency. As he looked over the statement one final time, Ethan felt the exhaustion creep in, but also a deep burning clarity. This scandal had threatened everything he had built, the recipe born in his mother's kitchen, the trust of millions of families, the pride of honest work. But this wasn't the end of the story. Not yet. There was still a reckoning to complete and a company to restore. In the days that followed the corporate takedown, the fallout unfolded quickly and decisively. Tracy Bell and her key associates were arrested, charged with fraud, food safety violations, and conspiracy to defraud a national brand. Local news outlets ran the story on repeat, dubbing it the Nuggo King conspiracy, while national media followed suit, splashing Ethan Walker's face and company name across headlines. But Ethan didn't shy away from the scrutiny. He faced reporters head-on at a press conference, standing at a podium flanked by Claire Morgan and members of the legal and operations teams. What happened was a betrayal, not just of Nuggo King, but of the families we serve. Ethan said, "But we believe in truth, and we believe in owning our mistakes. That's why we acted, and that's why we'll continue to act." His candor drew both criticism and admiration, but behind the scenes, Ethan remained focused on the only thing that mattered: rebuilding better. The Houston branch, once the epicenter of the fraud, underwent a complete transformation. The greasy tiles and broken signage were replaced with polished floors, updated branding, and a glass-walled kitchen that allowed customers to see every step of the food prep process. Ethan wanted transparency, not just in policy, but in practice. Retraining began. Immediately, corporate flew in top trainers to lead sessions on quality control, ethics, and food safety. Every staff member was given a clean slate, except those directly involved in the cover-up. Most had left or were terminated during the investigation, but a few, like David Harris and Maya Thompson, stood out for their honesty and courage during the storm. On the day of the reopening, Ethan handed David a crisp, red and gold manager's uniform. "You kept this place standing when everything around it was falling apart," he said. "Now help lead it forward." Maya, beaming beside him, accepted her new title as assistant manager. For them, this wasn't just a promotion, it was a second chance. Across the 12 affected locations, similar scenes played out. Nuggo King's internal culture, once stretched thin by rapid growth, and franchise autonomy was overhauled with new oversight systems. Supply chain verification protocols were introduced, QR-tagged packaging, photographic inventory logging, and random third-party audits. A new hotline was established for employees to report concerns directly to the corporate ethics team, bypassing local management. And the message was clear: no more fear, no more silence. Ethan worked side by side with Claire and the new compliance division to ensure these changes weren't just cosmetic. He visited each of the reopened branches, shook hands with every crew member, and listened to their experiences. "You were failed by leadership," he told them, "but you'll never be ignored again." 3 months after the scandal broke, Ethan returned to the Houston location on a bright spring morning. The restaurant bustled with energy customers in the drive-thru, kids laughing in the dining area, and a kitchen team moving in rhythm, the scent of real Nuggo King spices drifting into the air. David approached with a clipboard in hand. "Orders are up 30% from last year," he reported. Loyalty program brought most of the regulars back, and the new oversight system. Seamless. Ethan smiled, accepting a fresh nugget sample and biting into it thoughtfully. The flavor was right. The texture was right. And most importantly, the spirit of the company was intact. He looked around the space at the banner over the counter, reading "real ingredients, real accountability," and felt something deeper than relief. It was redemption. Outside media trucks still occasionally pulled into the lot, hoping to get a new angle on the story, but Ethan declined interviews. "This isn't about headlines." He told Claire, "It's about honoring the people who rebuilt this from the ground up." The last legal proceedings wrapped up quietly. Tracy Bell received an 8-year sentence. Her brother-in-law, Doug Weller, got 12. Several managers across the network received lesser sentences and were ordered to pay restitution. The FDA permanently shut down Horizon Meats. But while justice had its place, Ethan's focus remained on healing. He launched a new internal initiative called the Integrity Program, designed to recognize employees who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. The first honorees, David and Maya, whose portraits now hung in the Houston break room as quiet reminders of resilience. Standing beneath the glow of a warm Texas sun, Ethan reflected on the journey. The betrayal had shaken Nuggo King to its core, but it hadn't destroyed the company. It had exposed the cracks that needed repair. And in repairing them, it had revealed what truly held the business together: not just recipes or profits, but people with values, people who cared. As he watched a mother and child walk out the front doors holding a tray of freshly prepared nuggets, Ethan knew the truth. Nuggo King was stronger now, not because it had avoided crisis, but because it had met that crisis head-on, rebuilt with intention, and remembered what mattered most. If stories like this moved you, stories of justice, redemption, and the courage to do what's right, then don't forget to subscribe to Deep Inside HQ. Here we uncover the truth behind everyday heroes, expose hidden injustices, and bring you stories that leave a lasting impact. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that integrity still matters, and leave a comment to let us know what moment hit you hardest. This is more than storytelling, it's a movement. Be part of it.